Yeah, I think we all knew about Dunkirk because I think particularly in England, you learn so much about the Second World War growing up, just because it is such a fundamental part of our history and obviously the world's history, but particularly Dunkirk is so integral to how the UK treated the Second World War afterwards. We often talk about the spirit of Dunkirk. I think even if you don't learn that phrase, it's very present in history books and in lessons, that it kind of set the tone for the rest of the Second World War, and it was this coming together of people to get through such a crisis and this community spirit. So yeah, I think I knew a bit, but after doing the film, it was just amazing to learn all the little details and the resourcefulness of the men and the extents they went to and the desperateness of the situation, really.
Did y'all do research too, I suppose? Or did you know about it beforehand, Dunkirk?
Yeah, I knew about it, but it depends where you grew up in the UK. I mean, where I grew up in the Scottish borders, so we learned about the Navy and Scapa Flow up in Orkney and things like that. But it's hard to not be aware of it growing up in the UK.
There's a museum in London called the Imperial War Museum, and much to my delight, they had a lot of audio recordings with men like Mr. Dawson, who I bet it sounded like you'd listen to them too, because sometimes I saw little details that Chris had taken with his imagination and made into the story of the film. But these were nice 60-minute or 90-minute recordings with these men, and they helped me to understand how little they knew about what they were going towards. The government at the time obviously was keen not to frighten the English people who'd only just got over the First World War, and didn't want to know how terribly badly things were going in France at that time. So yes, those recordings were very helpful to me.
Okay. Right over here.
Two questions for Mr. Nolan. One, this for me really felt like a locked room thriller, so I'm wondering cinematic influences. And then two, this is a game changer for moviegoers because of the IMAX experience. It's like something we've never really seen before. So if you could talk a little bit about the IMAX, shooting almost the whole thing in IMAX, and then going forward, is this the way you're going to be making movies?
Well, I've been working with IMAX for about 10 years now, and with each film we've tried to maximize our use of it, try and shoot more of the film that way. This film felt more than any other I've made that I needed to try and immerse the audience in the experience and create what I call a sort of cinema of experience, really take them there. And IMAX is the best format to be able to do that. Obviously that poses production challenges, but I think it's well worth it in the finished product. As far as influences creatively on the film, we looked at a lot of suspense films. I really wanted the film to be driven primarily through the mechanism of suspense, which I think is one of the most cinematic of film forms, most pure cinema. So we looked at Hitchcock, we looked at various influences. I think the one I would point to most is probably Clouseau's Wages of Fear, which I think has a very, very distinct influence on various aspects of the film. But I like to cast a pretty wide net in terms of films to show the crew before we start. We looked at a lot of different things. We looked at some David Lean films for the treatment of landscape. We looked at Ryan's Daughter, the treatment of the beaches in that extraordinarily visual film. But I think Wages of Fear was the one that we most sort of honed in on as that language of suspense.
Right over here.
Yes, my question is for Harry Styles. So how did you, making your debut in a Chris Nolan film is so impressive. How did you prepare for your role, and what did you learn from your fellow cast members?
I think being on a set like this, it's hard to not just be always learning. I feel like being around people that you're a fan of just feels like a privilege. I think you try and soak up as much of that as possible. I think Chris has, like Mark mentioned earlier, Chris has this way of, he's not really controlling you, and I think it gives you a confidence to kind of be as natural as you possibly can. You never feel like you're trying to kind of hit too many notes at the same time. He never has you overthinking stuff. And I've just felt very lucky to be on, the set of of a man that I'm personally a fan of his work, with a group of actors who I'm also a fan of their work too. So I just felt very grateful to be involved, truly.
When you hear these planes, do you all feel like you should duck or something? I mean, just is it kind of a...
I thought it was a sound effect like yesterday when we were doing interviews. I really did.
You'll never think of planes or anything the same way, I'm sure. Right over here?
The evacuation or miracle of Dunkirk, it evokes something different in everyone. I want to know what it evokes in you collectively, and why you want to tell this story.
I'll go first so that no one steals my answer. For me, I think what it really is about, when you think of the Dunkirk spirit, when you think about if the story has a particular meaning, I think for me it's about communal heroism as opposed to individual acts of heroism. I think it's about the cumulative effect of small acts of human heroism and what we can achieve together rather than individually.
I would say I think it's very much about communal heroism and how these small acts can obviously lead to, yeah, thank you.
Does everyone agree with that? Okay, good. We'll go on to the next question.
I actually have something to add
Emma,
to that.
yes.
Because I think the thing that I love about this story is the fact that it's a reversal of the traditional roles, right? So, normally we're used to watching any film that involves war or the army. They are the heroes and they come in and they save the day. And I think that what's incredible about the evacuation is that it was the regular people. It was the ordinary people who came in and completely reversed things and changed the course of history. So that's what's interesting to me.
Okay. We're getting tight on time. We've got one question over here, and then we'll have one last question. So right here.
Hola.
So one question.
Yes, of course. Mr. Nolan, as I'm sitting in the theater and I'm hearing the clock, it's just maddening and exciting at the same time. I was wondering if you played anything to that effect for the actors.
No, not on set. I'm not really a fan of. Well, let me put it this way: our set was complicated enough without trying to introduce the element of playback. But the planning of the relationship between the musical picture started in pre-production before we ever started to shoot anything. And so I had it on headphones sometimes, and I had it with me. And the genesis of the track is it's a recording I made of a watch that I own that I gave to Hans, and we started to develop a rhythmic language of how that would build up the score from there to fuse with the picture and create a sense of forward momentum for the whole film.
Last question, Cindy.
For Christopher Nolan and Harry, could you talk about physically what was the toughest scene to film? And for Mr. Nolan, what is the one scene that gets you the most in this movie, if you have a favorite?
How was it for you physically?
It's great for me physically. You should answer that one.
It was terrible for me physically. I think the thing was that everyone on set was incredibly aware of how obviously anything, however tough it got for us, it was nothing compared to what was happening. And I think the focus that we all had to kind of do our jobs to try and be a part of telling the story, there wasn't really any room for personal discomfort or complaining. It's also impossible to complain on a set where your director's going through the exact same thing as you. He's, like Mark said, he's not in a tent, he's in the water with you, he's in the sand with you, he's cold, he's the first one there and the last one to leave. And I think it's, if anyone kind of thought about complaining, they kind of were like, yeah, I might not do that actually, because...
I mean, sometimes it's a little bit awkward to talk about my own response to the film we've all made, but I would just like to, I think for me personally, there's a very small moment, there's a little look that's exchanged between Mark's character and Tom Glencarney's character at a key moment. And it was something that I overlooked, hadn't even included in the script in terms of the response to something that happened. And Mark had sort of pointed it out to me, and very much worked with Tom and with Barry about what would be happening outside the terms of the script, what would be happening between the scenes that I'd actually written. And what that produced was something that you dream of as a director when you bring on great talents like Mark, like Tom, like Barry. You're hoping for moments that you didn't anticipate that actually come to define a particular part of the story, and that's what that is for me.
July 21st is when Dunkirk opens. Thank you all for your
Thank you
time.
so much.
Dunkirk,